Hi.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Knock Knock Hi with the Glockenflickens. I am Will Flannery, also known as Dr. Glockenflicken.
I'm Kristen Flannery, also known as Lady Glockenflicken.
Over time, it's become more Glockenflicken. Glockenflicken.
It's all in the back of your throat. Just it's very glottal.
Okay, we are talking medical education today. So this is a whole different world. So, I feel like the further I have gotten from med school, the less I talk about med school, the less I have.
Well, you're not in academics, so you're not plugged into the world anymore.
Not in the world, and like all of our advocacy efforts and educational efforts are more either like in the medical, like practicing physicians or the healthcare system. But there's this whole other system that's got its own set of problems, and that's medical school and how medical students become residents.
Yes.
Which includes the match and how that's changed over time and the issues with the match and the perceived physician shortage. And do we need more med schools? Do we need more residency programs? Do we have enough of those things? All these questions we get answered today.
All right.
That's right.
Do we though?
We do. What are you talking about? Of course we do. What we learned is they're complicated.
Yes, exactly. That was what I'm getting at.
They're complicated. But if there's anybody who can shed a little bit of light on all of this stuff,
absolutely,
it's the sheriff of sodium, Dr. Bryan Carmody. So this is someone I've known for years on Twitter. I've been aware of he had a blog, and now he does more YouTube channels. If you want deep dives into all of these issues we're going to be talking about, check it out, the sheriff of sodium on YouTube.
Yeah, we just got to kind of scratch the surface across the board today, but there's so much to say on each of these like individual topics.
Bryan Carmody is a pediatric nephrologist at Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters in Norfolk, Virginia. Norfolk, I think that's how you say it. Norfolk, not Norfolk.
No,
it's Norfolk.
I don't think so.
It's Norfolk.
Yeah.
He's an associate professor at Eastern Virginia Medical School and teaches kidney stuff, and also an associate residency program director for the pediatrics residency program there. And it's got a lot of insight. Just has been just kind of in this world.
And in the data,
in the data, the match data.
Yeah.
So we talk a little bit about match data. And so if all that stuff is interesting to you, you just want to know like what's going on in the world of the match and how doctors become doctors, this is the episode for you. So let's get to it.
Let's go.
Here is the sheriff of sodium. Hey, Kristen, remember how you love eyelid mites now?
Sure.
Well, there's a lot of confusion out there. I want to clear something up.
Okay.
All right. People think they can get eyelid mites from dogs and cats.
Can they?
No. These particular Demodex mites are specific to humans.
Okay.
So spread from dogs and cats is not expected. That's a myth.
Can't get them from cuddling our poodle.
No. Demodex mites that cause blepharitis live on humans. Most adults already have them. They just usually don't cause problems. It's when they overgrow that they can lead to itchy, red, irritated eyelids. Those little collarettes.
The crusties at the base of the eyelashes. Right. And the good news is there's a prescription eye drop available for Demodex blepharitis.
That is great news. To learn more about eyelid health and Demodex blepharitis, visit miteslovelids.com. Again, that's miteslovelids.com to learn more. This ad is brought to you by Tarsus Pharmaceuticals.
Hey, teacher besties, I'm Andrea Forkham, and I am so excited to share with you that my book, They Never Taught Us That, is available right now. It is everything an experienced or first-year teacher needs to manage the chaos of the modern classroom, including some anecdotes to make you feel a little bit better. Because if there is a way that you can screw up, I've probably done it. It also has advice on how to build trust with families, how to manage grading and lesson plans and IEPs, and everything else that they never went over in your teacher prep program. They Never Taught Us That is available everywhere right now.
All right, we're here with Dr. Bryan Carmody. Bryan, thank you so much for joining us. Finally, after all these years of seeing you on social media, I see you here in person, kind of through a camera. But thanks for being here.
I'm very happy to be here.
So I've been following you, going back to our Twitter days, which I don't frequent that website as much as I used to. But and I am going to thrust this upon you, Bryan, as you are in my mind, the king of medical education.
Congratulations.
Your coronation, whatever it may be, congratulations on being the king of medical education.
Well, that's a very flattering compliment. I think of myself as simply the sheriff of sodium. So
That's right. So, a perfect name. I can't think of a more perfect name for your like kind of social media persona as as a nephrologist, as a pediatric nephrologist. The sheriff of sodium. So that's you have a blog. You have social media presence. You're still writing.
a little bit, yeah. I mean, I've sort of evolved over time. Originally a lot of the stuff that I talked about was on Twitter, and as that has become less functional,
Yeah.
I've
Right.
gravitated more toward YouTube.
Gotcha. Well, let's
That's a big jump, Twitter to YouTube. Like those are different, way different formats.
Very, very different.
Yeah.
Um, but I want to let's jump into this. Let's just so what here's where we should start because I got a lot of questions about the match. Because one thing I know about you is like I can always guarantee after the match data comes out every year, I can guarantee that like you're going to come out with like a nice investigation
Hmm.
of all the data and what the trends are. And so I want to jump into all that, but let's start off kind of a little bit more basic than that, and do probably the hardest thing that anybody in medicine can ever be asked to do, which is explain the match
Mm.
as if we are people who have no idea what the match is.
Yeah.
I'll give you like 45 seconds. Let's see if you can do it.
Man, I'm just gonna be getting warmed up then. Um, one does not simply apply for a residency job. As
That's
you
right.
know, and this is an interesting story that I've talked about at length in other forums. So I'll try not to bore you here. But time was there were way more residency positions than there were residency applicants. And so, to ensure that hospitals got a resident and didn't have unfilled positions, they very aggressively headhunted applicants. And sometimes they would offer, third year, second year medical students positions. And that
Oh,
put a lot
wow.
of pressure on applicants to decide, is this offer that I got, I mean, it's good enough. Do I take this? Or do I hope that something from a place I really want to go to comes up later on? So applicants didn't like this system.
What year are we talking about here?
So this is through the 1930s and 40s with all the early headhunting. And so in the early 50s is when we had this solution to this imbalance that persists today, and that's the match. So the idea is that applicants investigate programs and programs review applicants, and they make preferences and submit those preferences to a central clearinghouse, which these days is called the NRMP. Well, for most specialties, it's the National Resident Matching Program, the NRMP. And that clearinghouse uses an algorithm to pair up the preferences of programs and applicants in the optimal manner. And so there comes a day, as you know, in March, if you're one of the main match specialties, where you open an envelope and you find out where you match. So that's how medical students go into residency. You don't have infinite degrees of freedom about where you go. You're subject to this matching process.
That was pretty good.
Yeah.
That's right.
And the match is like contractual, right? You can't just say, "Oh no, I don't like that. I'm not going to go." Right? I mean, not only would you not want to do that because then you don't have a job, but like you also can't do that, right? Or
Well,
can you?
not without penalty. So this gets a little bit complicated, but you can, I mean, programs can elect to not recruit through the match. And even if you use the match, I mean, different specialties use different matching services. So most specialties use the NRMP, but ophthalmology, of course, still uses the SF match, the old San Francisco match.
Yeah.
Urology does their own thing. They have the AUA match. The military has a separate matching process. So you have your sort of choice of matching services, I suppose. But and programs can elect to operate outside of the matching system. But if you're talking about the NRMP match, if you want to offer any of your positions as a program, you got to offer all of them. And if you're talking about U.S. medical students, you're going to participate in the match. If you're a graduating U.S. medical student. And so if you choose to participate in the match, you are making a commitment that you will accept the results of that. You'll take that position and earnestly work it for a period of time at least.
So they come up with in the 50s. They come up with this brilliant, full fail-proof solution. Right? There's nothing that could go wrong with doing this match process. So fast forward to let's say like the last 20 years that this is the match has been going on. What are the big what were the issues? What are the big issues that have come up like in the last couple decades with the match that causes the most ire amongst applicants?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think probably one thing I gotta set out to be fair is that, when we talk about the match, I mean, there's the match with a capital M, meaning the matching algorithm, which really I think works pretty well. And then there's the
Mhm.
match, meaning, the whole thing, the whole enchilada, the match writ large, the whole
Right.
residency selection system. And and that's, I think, what people have a lot more beef with is the residency, what I call the residency selection arms race.
Tell us about what does that arms race mean? What do you mean by that?
Well, by any objective standard, today's applicants do a lot more stuff than applicants have in previous eras. If you look at USMLE scores, they're higher. If you look at published research articles, they have more of them. Anything that there's more of that you can have, applicants today have more than applicants in the past. And it's I call it an arms race because if you look at the match rate, it's the same. I mean, you have a similar match rate for U.S. graduating medical students, at least from MD schools, going back years and years. Um,
Mm,
but to get the positions that people want, there's more CV buffing. There's more
gotcha.
preparation that you've got to do to make yourself competitive for those specialties.
Yeah, so it's in order to feel like as a med student applying for residency, to feel like you have set yourself up to be able to match, there's this pressure to have like 15 publications in some specialties,
Right.
or to just research experiences. Or I understand they brought the hobby section back into the application, so maybe you just got to have like the best. You have to like be an Olympic athlete.
That's
And
what got you your interview was they were like, "Comedy, what?"
I did have a little stand up comedy on my
And it
application.
piqued their interest, and the rest is history.
But I want to so let's dig into a couple of these things, as in particular the research. Is that across? Are you seeing when you look at the data, and I assume like number of publications is like we see that right, and the different specialties and who matches and who doesn't. Is that kind of across the board, or is it like a few specialties that seem to be like the numbers are just getting way inflated?
Yeah. There is an across the board rise, but it is certainly led by applicants in a handful of the most competitive specialties. I mean, and so in the NRMP match, we're talking about neurosurgery, ENT, plastic surgery, dermatology. There's those are all specialties where orthopedics. There are not a lot of positions, and there's a lot of people who would love to do those specialties. And so to
Hmm.
distinguish themselves relative to other applicants, research is one of those battlegrounds in the residency selection arms race.
But if the match rate is the same, are they really distinguishing themselves from each other? Can't they just sort of collectively agree, "You know what? Let's all just cool down a little bit."
And just and maybe like not just try to
Kill ourselves
kill
trying to
do
because look, if you were doing that and it would have an effect, I get that. But they're doing that and it sounds like there's not really an effect. Everyone just had to, you
yeah,
know, raise the bar. But if everyone is moving one way or another, like
right.
it doesn't matter. So like maybe they should just all decide to come back down.
Well, I think that gets to like a question of what's driving this?
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
driving the research push?
Well, so in the aggregate, for these competitive specialties, there's not as many positions as there are applicants. So what that means is some applicants whose dream is to be an orthopedic surgeon, let's say, or an ophthalmologist. Um,
Mhm.
they're not going to have that opportunity. I mean, that's the simple fact. So what we have is to get to Lady Glockenflecken's question. it's a relative competition. It's where it's a competition in which your absolute credentials don't matter as much as your relative credentials. So and there's lots of examples about that. One that just came up in current events that I sort of just noticed in passing as I heard it. There was and you'll have to forgive me because I'll get the details wrong, but I think it's a great example. There was a marathon recently, and several runners, for the first time in human history, ran under 2 hours for the marathon. But,
I did read that.
yeah, but I mean, whoever was third place in that race, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right.
It's your relative position that matters. So, all this competition is to ensure that you're the person that matches and somebody else doesn't.
Uh, can I ask you, Brian, how many publications did you have as a med student?
Yeah, it's zero, in fact.
I was hoping you would say that because so did I. And I see these numbers of like neurosurgery applicants having on average, I don't know what is it now? 15 research experiences, 30, maybe more. And I think this is like what the it seems like the expectations are getting so skewed to the point where like could this be actually a detriment to these students trying to get to the point where they need to be at the end of med school? And are we pushing people in the direction that's not gonna make the best doctors, I guess, you know?
Yeah, I talk a lot about that. I think that's a very serious concern because, I mean, USMLE scores are higher, research output's higher, but I'll tell you one thing that ain't no higher now than it was back when you and I graduated from medical school. That's the number of hours in the day. I mean, all
Right.
this increased stuff. There is a hidden cost. There is something that has to give for people to devote this time to USMLE prep, to publishing these research papers.
I'd be very curious if you know of any data, like, are there any correlations between as this has, the pressure has risen and risen and risen and people keep having to do more and more, is there a correlation with suicide rates or other mental health measures?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually don't know the answer to that. I
Mm.
mean, where I thought you were going to go with that question was, is there evidence that we're making better doctors? And I would say
Yeah, that was
no.
what I thought you were gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you actually asked a more serious question, and there may be data, but I don't know those offhand. But as to the question of are we making better doctors, we don't know, and the answer is probably not. I mean, go to the most senior physicians in your hospital and see what they think of today's medical students. They aren't rejoicing, even though
Mhm.
USMLE scores have never been higher.
Right.
Objectively, we have smarter, more accomplished, more knowledgeable students coming in, but not,
Well, look.
not everyone sees
Well,
that.
but do we like what's the quality of the research? That's the other question is are we just producing research slop in order to, get these publications for med students?
Yeah.
Not that the med students aren't doing, capable of doing quality work, but just the sheer number of it in the, like, as you mentioned, the same amount of time, something has to give, right? So, like, are we maintaining, and this is a genuine question, I don't know, are we maintaining good quality medical research or is that suffering too because of this pressure to just
Yes.
go up and up and up?
Yeah, that's actually something I do know a little bit about that I have looked into a little bit, and actually have a research paper on it. But
Ah,
if you
very
look at
meta.
Tell us.
if you look at medical student presentations or publications, I want to say when we looked at all the medical student publications in PubMed, I want to say it was around 25% have never been cited. Now, maybe they're just
Oh my
great
god.
research that's waiting to be discovered, but in reality, I think many of those papers they served their purpose on an application, and now they're sitting unread in some dank corner of the internet where they don't really contribute to our body of knowledge.
Mhm.
And there's more. Well, at least there's more awareness of sort of research misconduct. I mean, if you look at, and several specialties have done these kind of studies where if you look at the papers that an applicant lists on their application, often you can't find those papers in the literature. Um,
Mm.
and I don't mean just now. I mean, ever. Like, it's not like, oh, maybe it just didn't get published yet and they told fit. But I mean, there's a lot of
Oh, wow.
misrepresentation
Yeah.
that can occur.
Wow.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're incentivizing, right? Is just greater, not that specific thing, but the greater the pressure to publish something if you haven't, published to the degree that you think you should. It's like the system itself is
Yeah.
incentivizing some of this behavior, is what
Well,
I'm trying to say.
that brings up kind of an issue I wanted to talk with you about, Brian, which is, not not to give like the the powerful people here too much of a benefit of the doubt, but like have we? I'm talking specifically about the changes in USMLE and going from a scored step one to pass fail. Do you feel like that has driven the research side of things, or has that what kind of effect has that had? I guess we'll start there. And do programs feel more pressure to put a focus on other parts of the application, like research, because they have one less data point that they can point to be like, oh, this person is a good applicant?
Yeah, I would say the answer to that is maybe. It's
Mm,
it's very appealing. For any when you talk about any of this stuff, which I'm known to do, I very frequently get, well, this is because step one is pass fail. Like
mm,
you look at the rising step 2 CK scores. This year, the average score on USMLE step 2 CK is 250, which, to put that in perspective, that would be an off the charts score for someone who took the test in its original days in the 90s. But if you look at the trend in that performance, it's a steady rising line for as long as we've had USMLE. There doesn't
mm,
really seem to be any upward inflection when step one went pass fail. The same thing is true actually about the research arms race. If you look back, the number of publications and presentations has been increasing. But at least so far, I don't think you can discern. If I gave you a graphic showing the average number of publications per year, I don't think, and you didn't know when USMLE had become pass fail, step one had become pass fail, I don't think you could pick it out by just looking at the graph. Now, maybe
mm.
it's a lagging indicator, because to do research, you got to find a project, you got to work it up over time. I mean, so I think it's the
Right.
idea that we just shift the competition to elsewhere. I think that's generally true. But I think it's been a little bit harder to show than maybe you might think.
So do you think let's just, you know, give us your take on the pass fail thing, because I've heard, just like you just mentioned, a lot of blame being put on that for different things. Has that been a net positive? Let's do from the perspective of the applicant, the students. Has pass fail, do you feel like, been a net positive, net negative, or just really no change at all in terms of, however you want to interpret that?
Yeah,
Anxiety, stress,
Outcomes.
outcomes. What do you think?
it's a good question. I think the promise of pass fail has largely been unrealized. But I guess before I answer your question, I guess I would sort of step back and think about it a little bit more philosophically, because the thing is, like I say, there's a limited number of residency positions in these specialties that people want. Within a given specialty, there's a limited number of sort of very desired programs. Unless the distribution of specialties available and program positions available matches the exact distribution of applicants' desires, the reality is some applicants are not going to get what they want, and that's just a fact of the system. So the question for us becomes not, I mean, what I'm getting at is there's no metric you can use that's going to let more people match. It's not like if we make
Right.
step one, we could add a step four, and now suddenly everybody can be a dermatologist. It doesn't work like that. We're constrained by the structural limitations of the system. So the question is, how do we want students to compete? Given that the number of winners and losers that we're going to have is fixed. I mean, how do we want them to compete? We can compete with step one scores, and some students would prefer to do that. And they might be right. They might be better off if they had a step one they could compete with. Other people would prefer to compete with step two. Other people would prefer to compete with research. We could do something totally arbitrary. I mean, we could have students see who could stand in a hot room the longest to test their
Right.
endurance, or
Mhm.
I mean, you can
Well, the
imagine the
point
things
is
we could do.
we have to there has to be some form of stratification, right? I mean,
Hmm.
that's because you have, like you said, there are more applicants than there are spots for
Right.
most specialties, right?
And so the question is, I mean, yeah, or on one extreme, if we wanted to have a stress-free system, you could just have a pure lottery. You want to be a dermatologist, just pull a raffle ticket and see.
I
But
don't know if that's stress-free.
well, at
Both of
least,
us were just
yeah,
like,
I mean,
It
"Whoa."
focuses all the stress at a very, very small
Yeah.
point in time. Yes.
it removes it all from your control. But the
Yeah.
point
Yes.
is, some of these systems that we're sort of making up here, some of them probably have more value to society than others. If we select students to be, I don't know, let's say we made a system where we said, if you want to be an ophthalmologist, I'm gonna trace your family tree, and however many generations I have to go back to find a physician, that's how I'm gonna pick you. You go back one, all right,
Mhm.
you're in. You go back two, maybe. We can do a system like that. Would that
Mm,
create any value for society? Very little,
Probably not.
right?
Probably not.
But when you use something like, let's say, a step 2 CK score, at least conceivably, people are learning medical facts that might be useful. And that's not to say step 2 CK is the best metric we could use, but you're using a metric where the people who compete, maybe they're learning something that will help a human patient one day. And like I say, if you sort of look at it that way, then you start to realize that there's lots of ways that applicants could compete that would probably benefit not just the winners of the competition, but also the losers. Imagine, and I'm just spitballing here, imagine that suppose we had an exercise where every medical student had to handle an in flight emergency.
Mm,
Sort of like the old, USMLE Step 2 CS that, you and I took. But
Yeah.
instead of having something like, silly, let's have a real life practical thing that you might confront one day. Well, guess what? At the end of the day, the match rate in ophthalmology is still going to be 65%. 65% of people are going to get the chance, 35% are not. But now, the 35% that don't, instead of just having a publication that no one's going to read hiding in the internet somewhere, now they've learned something that who knows? Maybe they're going to be on a plane when someone's going to say, is there a doctor on board? And they say, yeah. And maybe they can add value in that case. So there are metrics that we could use that would be better for society, that would be better for human patients. And so when you look at it through that lens, like I say, are there applicants who would prefer to compete with a step 1 score? Yes. Has the removal of a step 1 score led to emphasis on other metrics? Yeah, I think that's probably true. Um, but it's hard for me to feel a whole lot of nostalgia about the stuff that we had to learn at that level of detail for
Right.
step 1.
Yeah.
It's hard for me
Oh,
to
for
see a
sure.
lot of societal benefit beyond a certain point.
You don't still use the Krebs cycle every single day? Well, you might. I don't know. He doesn't for sure.
Yeah, no.
No. What I'm hearing though is, maybe step 2 CK should come back. I don't know. I mean, it's not CK,
Yes.
CS. Maybe maybe we should, have some elaborate, in-flight simulations. I'm not sure. It's, you really take it up a notch for that. I remember my CS. I don't know if you remember that.
You go to
I
hotel.
had to fly.
Yeah. Like Chicago or something?
Yeah, and I think that was the
Did you have to, on your flight, attend
no,
to an in-flight
no, I did
emergency?
not. But what's wrapped up in a lot of what we've been talking about is also, uh, beyond the academics, is like the cost
Yes.
for a lot of this, the cost to students.
Mhm.
And I know you've talked
Like
about this.
financial
Yeah, the
cost. Yeah.
financial cost. And I know, Brian, you've talked a lot about this with regard to the amount of money that in RMP, and the the
AMC,
NBME
I've
that
been,
owns
yes. Yeah,
AMC.
NBME and
Yeah.
AMC, I've been pretty critical of.
Yeah, just the amount of money wrapped in all of this, and some of how that might change some incentives, to, how which of these tests are gonna keep going and which ones might go away. I don't know.
Maybe we should take a quick break and then we should come back
Okay.
and talk all about that.
Oh, yeah, and I also want to. That's a good idea. Let's do that, and then I also want to dive into the 2026 match data if we can. All right, we are back with Bryan Carmody, Sheriff of Stodium. So, Bryan, can we talk about the most recent match data? Are you ready?
We can talk about match data. I love all match data.
He's like, we'll talk about it
Let's
all
do it.
day,
Let's do
every
it.
day, anytime.
Okay, I have a very simple. I have a very simple question. Who's happy right now? Who are the top 3 happiest specialties based on the match data? Who's just jumping for joy? They're just thrilled.
Oh gosh, you want me to look at it from the program standpoint?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Well, in recent years, the market for new neurosurgeons, new dermatologists, new plastic surgeons, new orthopedic surgeons has been very tight. Those programs are in a position to welcome the most polished applicants. I think that they're probably pretty happy with the current state of affairs. I mean, it presents different challenges when you have so many, very, very qualified applicants applying to your program, but it's easier than the alternative.
So who's not happy? Who's really kind of like having some internal some their
Angst, existential dread,
existential crisis right now? Who is it?
Well, the big story this year, of course, was the continuing decline in the fill rate for family medicine. And emergency medicine and pediatrics, are really not that far behind as far as having programs that it's difficult for them to fill initially in the match. Now, they can of course fill with applicants who don't match, but to go through an entire interview season and interview 100 applicants and then have your program be empty is still a little bit of a gut punch, for programs.
So family medicine, I think pretty consistently has the most open positions that don't get filled year after year, right? Are they usually number one for
That's
that?
generally been true. Yeah, that was something that I talked about actually after this year's match. I mean, there was a period of time when radiation oncology actually had the greatest percentage of unfilled positions, and they've sort of contracted a bit and rebounded. A couple of years ago, emergency medicine had that sort of title, I guess. But pediatrics and family medicine have been steadily marching upward as the number of programs and positions has grown, and the number of applicants interested in those specialties hasn't necessarily.
I mean, that was going to be my question: which direction is that going? But it sounds like it's both: fewer applicants and more programs or more spots in programs. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And people, which is why the match rates only tell you but so much. But and so there's always a lot of hand wringing after the match with things that are not necessarily true. People conflating these unfilled positions with physician shortages, which, like I said, I mean, if you have a spot that's left over after the match, you'll have 1,000 applicants who go unmatched who are interested in that, taking that position in what's called the SOAP, the Supplemental Offer and Acceptance Program. So those positions go filled before the news even hits the wire. But yeah, that is one thing, is that the number of positions offered has continued to grow. There are strong incentives for hospitals to want to have residents, even if it's challenging for them to fill those positions.
So we don't have. I mean, so let's like dive in, because I'm sure that people will be interested in like the topic of physician shortage, because we hear that over and over again. There's a physician shortage. So what you're saying is we have enough people who are graduating med school, enough physicians. We just have a I guess a shortage of people, a shortage of desired residency programs or residency spots. I guess everybody's
Yeah.
wanting to go to a handful of specialties,
Yeah.
and are leaving all of the positions unfilled that are just waiting for them. And so, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there's a few different things here. So yeah, if you want to talk real numbers, this year there were in the entire match, if you take all comers, there were about 48,000 match applicants and there were about 41,000 positions. So if you take all comers, applicants from all different educational and training backgrounds, there's more applicants than there are positions.
Mhm.
Um, However, if you look at the number of US medical students, there are, let me see, I should have this written down. It's probably like in the neighborhood of 1.3 positions for every graduating US MD and DO. So there's a surplus of total positions for the number of US MD and DO students who graduate every year. Um, However, if you look at competitive specialties, if you look at something like, like I mentioned, ophthalmology, you have about 2/3 of applicants who match, and you have a surplus of, that's almost half as much as the people who matched. So there's a strong preference among applicants for more competitive specialties, especially those applicants from US, India, and DO schools. Um, and even that is separate, I think, a separate issue from when you hear on the news about, the physician shortage, because, that's another topic that I can talk about at length, and I guess I have in other forums. But I'm very skeptical of much of the rhetoric and even some of the data that come out about physician shortages. I think that largely what we have poor incentives for doctors to practice in the way that we say we want doctors to practice, and sort of a distributional problem where I don't think that we really have a shortage of I don't know, cash only dermatologists in Miami Beach. Do we have a shortage of
We do
primary care
not.
physicians in central Nebraska? Yeah, there's some counties that have
Yeah.
zero.
I totally agree with you. And knowing that, I interviewed at a place when I was looking for jobs as an ophthalmologist where there were 3 offices in one building of different ophthalmology practices, and I was like, "What is going on here?" More ophthalmologists per capita in that place, I won't say where it is, than anywhere else in the country. So, it's I totally agree with you, and so we don't need more residency positions because that's another thing you hear. Well, we have a shortage. We need more. There's gotta be more funding for more residency spots. What will that do?
Right. I think hospitals have strong incentives to have residents, even in the absence of additional federal subsidies. Residents are a highly reliable, very skilled, and inexpensive workforce for hospitals. Having
It's a
federal
very diplomatic
subsidies,
way to put
yeah,
that.
federal subsidies sweeten the deal, but most residency positions would be money generating for the hospital, even in the absence of any additional subsidy.
So what do we do?
I
Pray
mean,
tell.
Well,
I yeah. Tell us what you think. How would you fix this?
for which problem?
Everyone applying to kind of the same
Yeah, to
places or specialties, how do we sort of even the distribution a little bit?
That's a tough one.
that's a big
It's
that's a
yeah.
big question.
Right. Yeah, that's a tough one because, in general, people like the same kinds of things. I mean, people want to live in
Yeah,
the same places, and generally, medical students, like other forms of Homo sapiens, would prefer to have more money than less, and so they pursue those natural incentives. So, like I said, to me, it's not. I don't know that's a problem that's deserving of our time to fix, honestly, because you can't make people want other things. You can try to sweeten the pot for other things if it's a societal benefit to have, if it's a societal good to have such and such, then we should provide incentives to encourage people to do that. But let people make that choice. So yeah, that's sort of my take on that.
where would you
Yeah.
put where do you think we should put our efforts in trying to um so many things, and trying to solve this perceived physician shortage, and where would you like to see us like really put a lot of time and effort?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing you got to do is stand back and ask, why are things the way they are now? I mean, why is it that it's easy to find a doctor in some places and hard in others? Why is it that your doctor has a long waiting list, even if there seem to be a lot of doctors in that area? What are the incentives that drive those behaviors? And I think when you even do a superficial analysis on that, you see that, uh, if physician reimbursement is set not based on sort of the value of care that you provide necessarily, but the volume of care that you provide, well, that's maybe not the incentive we want for societal benefit. You know,
Mm,
um,
yeah,
if if we say that Cigna or Medicare or Anthem is going to reimburse you this amount, um, and it doesn't matter if you're practicing in a rural area or an urban area or a fancy suburban area. Well, where do you reckon people are going to want to practice? You know,
right.
they're going to practice in a place with amenities. They're not going to hang out a shingle and be the rural medicine doctor from your videos. It's a harder job for the same or less money.
I don't think anybody's hanging shingles anymore. Like that's
Yeah.
that's honestly, it's like there's like a death of private practice in this
Yeah.
country, and that's a whole nother issue. But one thing you said earlier that I've been kind of thinking about is so if why are residency programs? We'll use family medicine as an example. Why are we growing residency programs when we know that there's that the ones that exist often are already having trouble filling. Like, why is that? Why is that happening? Is it just because of the government incentives, the financial benefit, perceived benefit to hospitals? But what if they can't fill those spots? Well, then what's the point?
That's part of it is that, there are incentives that, even, for hospitals that have never trained residents, they can still tap into the federal subsidies that are offered through CMS. Um, but even then, even if you got no additional subsidy, um, how are you going to provide 24/7 coverage for your hospital wards, for your emergency room?
Mm,
How are you going to make sure that all the surgeons, discharge orders are all teed up and stuff? I mean, residents can fill all those roles and they'll probably fill those roles more reliably and you have more control over them than if you had to hire physician assistants or nurse practitioners to provide that same degree of coverage. It's much more expensive in the free market to acquire that degree of coverage for all those things.
what does the match data say about international medical graduates? Because I know that in primary care specialties, there's a higher percentage of IMGs that are filling those positions. Is the
Right.
proportion of matched IMGs, is that increasing? Is it staying pretty flat? What's going on there?
Yeah. So international medical graduates, like they're a diverse group. I mean, you have folks who are United States citizens who went to medical school in the Caribbean or other places. You have physicians who have trained or sometimes even have extensive practice experience in other countries. And all those people, I mean, if you graduate from a medical school other than in the United States, you're all sort of lumped together as as an
Mm,
IMG for the purpose of match statistics. But lately, and also if you look at just match percentages, they're sometimes a little bit hard to interpret because they fluctuate, with the number of people who are applying. So, for instance, for non-citizen U.S. medical graduates, after 2001, there was a decrease in the number of applicants because of more challenges getting visas in the United States after 2001. And then things rebounded over a time. But basically, to get to your question, I mean, for a non-U.S. citizen international medical graduate, the match rate it's a little better than a coin flip. So only around 50 some percent of non-citizen international medical graduates get the opportunity to train by being offered a position to match. For U.S. citizen match or international medical graduates, a little bit better, and it's actually been increasing in recent years.
so that would be U.S. citizens who like go to the Caribbean for med school
That's the
or
biggest part. Yeah, I mean,
okay.
there are others who go to Canada or Israel or Ireland, but the biggest group is
Yeah.
people who train in the Caribbean.
Mm.
And interestingly, one reason that those match rates may be looking a little bit better is that the number of applicants is declining. Especially the Caribbean schools have cut back class sizes as the number of osteopathic medical schools in particular and MD schools in the United States has grown rapidly in recent years. It's been, I think, a little bit harder for them to recruit. And as a matter of strategy, they've pared back their class sizes at some of the biggest schools.
So mentioning med schools, that was going to be my next question because we had talked about, whether or not we have enough residency programs, and that's something that people always point to. What about medical schools? Do we have too few? Do we have too many? Do we have let's the three little bears this. Is that what it's called? The three yeah, three little
I've never heard that used as a verb,
you know you know so
but
what's the mon
I think you mean Goldilocks
the gold
and the three bears.
let's that's it. That's I knew like three little bears didn't sound right. Goldilocks and let's Goldilocks this. What do you think? What's the right amount of med schools here? Are we getting too many, too few? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know that we need any more. And I say that for a couple of reasons. I think the main constraint on adding more medical schools, it's not that it's hard to open a medical school, in a certain way. The hard part is finding good clinical training sites. If you want to train your medical students in the way that medical students have been historically trained, where they go to a big academic hospital and where they work with a team where there's residents and fellows and an attending, um, those sites are really saturated. Um, we've grown the number of medical schools a lot, but that number of giant academic medical centers is not exactly growing. So if we want to train medical students in the same manner in which we've historically trained them, I don't think you want more medical schools. You know, the preclinical years of medical school are sort of easy. I mean, not that it's easy to recruit faculty or anything, but as you know, most medical students don't even rely on their faculty to teach them anything. They have
Right. They're
high
not going to
quality third
class.
party. Yeah, right. They've got high quality third party resources, and most of that stuff could be done just through a web portal.
Right.
So, um, so yeah, I don't think that we need them, but the logic of them, we talked a little bit about the physician shortage. The physician shortage is the policy problem that justifies whatever solution you want. Whatever it is that you wanted to do for some other reason, the physician shortage is a great way to justify it. Here are people who struggle to access care. They're waiting long times. They live in rural areas. We need more medical schools. But then if the graduates of those medical schools maintain the same preferences as every other medical school graduate and they want to be orthopedic surgeons or, work in affluent areas, then you don't really fix that problem. But it does make a new medical school, which is good for the local
Mm.
economy, and provides jobs, and you have a steady income from student loans from the students that you recruit.
Yeah, that's a good point. Um,
It's
That's
complicated.
it's so complicated. And it's like, I know we're just asking, like, Brian, we're just asking you a question. Like, just dump your entire brain, all of the years of knowledge that you have of this. Just tell us all of it. And so, we'll wrap this up. But one kind of, I want to look to the future a little bit and just ask you, what as a you were an associate residency program director, for pediatrics. Um, what keeps you up at night about looking into the future as a residency program director? Like what is it? What's really kind of like makes you nervous? Or are you in the perfect spot? Is everything just great?
Well, I mean, it's a great thing to do. I mean, I love working with the residents. I love seeing them become. I love seeing them
Yeah.
come in and they don't know how to do stuff, and then they do, and it's just wonderful. I mean, that's one of the most fun things that I get to do. But I guess my worries there, and some of this is I guess somewhat particular to my specialty. Um,
Mm.
but um, in pediatrics, I guess philosophically, one of the things that you're trying to do is prevent rare but catastrophic outcomes. I mean, our patients are generally healthier. They're younger, they're resilient. They have a lot of things going for them. But bad stuff happens to kids, and that's one of the things that you're trying to accomplish as a pediatrician is to try to prevent that really bad stuff. And what that means is that if you make residency training provide less exposure to the bad things, to the very sick kids, you lose the opportunity to maybe make a difference in those ways yourself, because you're not talking about things that you're going to see every day. If you're if you're a trauma surgeon or something, I mean, you see catastrophic stuff every day. You're fixing it every day. If you're a pediatrician and you're making an unusual diagnosis, it may be something you do a time or two a career. And you got to be sharp. You got to be prepared to do it. Or to manage the sick kid. And so, the residency training standards in pediatrics have changed significantly just over the past couple of years.
Oh, I heard about that. They're like, are they shortening fellowships?
So that's another thing. So fellowships are being shortened. That is true. But the structure of the categorical pediatrics training is also changing to shift to more outpatient, which of course is the way that care is provided, but away from the inpatient setting, away from the ICUs, with a lot more individualized learning time. And it worries me that your blade's not going to be as sharp when you need it, to make a difference in those opportunities when you can.
Yeah, it's the length of we didn't really get into this, but the length of med school, the length of we talked about are the first 2 years of med school are just going to go away eventually, and we are just going to be like, okay, here's your
your AI download
here's
into your brain chip.
here's your third party program. Just go through this. We'll see you in a year and a half. And like that's it. Maybe you save a little bit of tuition. I don't know. And but once you get into residency, it's a whole different ball game. And I totally agree. You need that. You need to see the zebras, even if you're not going to see them all the time. You need to at least have that exposure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally am with you on that. And the last thing, do you like the signaling? Do you like that with the residency applications? So
What are you talking about?
so signaling is it's like the newest thing, right? They just added that a few years back. Is that
Yeah, it started in 2020. Yeah, so
my understanding is that you can basically flag a few programs like this. These are my top ones that I'm really interested in. Is that right?
Aren't you already doing that by ranking them?
It's like a super rank.
Yeah, this is in the before you even get to the ranking. This is when you just submit your application. So you might think that the mere act of submitting an application would be enough to identify you as being a person who is interested in training at a certain program, but this is not the case. So this is just another sort of offshoot of what we were talking about before, the residency selection arms race. So in order to gain advantage over each other, applicants began submitting more and more and more residency applications year after year. And the AAMC, which sponsored the software that allowed people to do this and charged per application, enabled this. And I've got a whole video on that if you're interested in that topic. But really, I mean, it benefited no one other than the AMC. Applicants applied to every program. Programs got applications from people that really had no interest in going there. And so this idea of signaling came about so that programs and applicants could show each other that they actually are interested. So depending on the specialty, you get a finite number of signals that you can attach to your application. So if you're applying in orthopedics, it's 30. If you're applying in pediatrics, it's 5. But when you are a program and you receive a signaled application, you know that someone actually is interested in going to your program. They didn't just click a button and use their credit card to apply to your program. They actually really want to go there because they've used a finite resource to show you that. And so I am a fan of it because, and it's not without trade-offs, but what we had before was not sustainable. I mean, just applying to every single program. I mean, program directors don't need that. It forces programs to gravitate toward these easily screenable objective metrics, like the research publications or like the USMLE scores, because you can't read 100 applications for every position you're trying to fill. You can't even review them in a cursory way. So the signaling allows programs to focus their attention on applicants who are really interested, and that's a good thing. For applicants, though, the downside is it forces them to sort of tip their hands to programs to show what they're interested in before they even know necessarily that they're going to be competitive. So it creates a new metagame for applicants where you've got to signal the places that are going to like you back. You can't just signal out of your heart's true desires, or you can't from a matter of game theory. You got to signal places that are likely to like you back so that you can get some interviews and then rank those programs and successfully match.
Oh, lots of mind games. Isn't it fun?
This is making my head hurt. It's like a pre-match match.
It makes me so glad I went through this years ago, honestly. But I mean, everybody, that's like an old guy thing to say, too.
Yeah.
It's
Back in my day.
Oh man. Well, so let's tell people where to find you. We talked about the Sheriff of Sodium on YouTube. That's your YouTube channel. I've seen a few of your videos. And the way you kind of break down, all of this stuff, all of these things we've talked about in like great detail. So if you're interested in any of this, the medical education, definitely check out the Sheriff of Sodium over on YouTube. Those are great videos. So please keep doing it, because I still come to you for like all the match stuff, like what's going on, like where
well, thank you.
How much is medical education imploding, or did we find a steady state? I don't know. I guess it's a work in progress, I guess, still. But and then you're also on any of X, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky. Sheriff of Sodium. Is that your name on all of them?
On those, I'm at JB Carmody, JBCAR.
Oh, JB Carmody.
Yeah.
All right. That's about it. Thanks for joining us, Bryan. This was awesome.
No, thank you for having me.
Do you get the sense, Kristen, that kind of over time things just get more and more complicated?
Yeah. I mean,
I think I try not to make your head spin too much with just trying to explain the match and talking with Bryan about all those things, but it's complex.
Yeah, and I don't know. The thing that my mind always goes to, and listen, I am not qualified to speak on any of this, so take this with a giant bag of salt. But like, if this is a system that was built in the 50s and we've just sort of tacked things on as we go, like at some point you got to just shake the whole thing up and start over for like, where are we now?
I think I've actually,
and I don't mean that about the match specifically. Yeah. I mean in general in life, right? Like eventually you get to a point where like this system is now outdated and we should just make a new system.
It's so funny because I know I've seen people on social media say, I wish that we could just like, have programs like just, apply to programs individually, just beyond outside the match.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's why the match
did that once.
That's why the match exists in the first place, is because that did not work out. Can you imagine being a second-year med student and then having like headhunters be like,
no, that's
like,
not the solution, clearly, because that was a problem in the first place.
You are a famous last name of a famous doctor, so you must be really smart too. We'll offer you 3 times the salary of a normal. Imagine how that's totally
not the thing. But also, like, look at medicine in the 50s and medicine now. Look at the world in the 50s and the world now. Like, different needs, different advances, different. Maybe it's complex. It's not enough to put Band-Aids on things at this point.
We're gonna have to have him come back and talk more about some individual things that are going on.
Deep dives.
All right, so you can let us know what you think of the episode, and if you have any other guest suggestions, by the way, we'd love to hear those. You can email us knockknockhi@human-content.com. Visit us on our social media platforms. Human Content Pods, that's where you can find the rest of the Human Content offerings on Instagram and TikTok. Thanks to all the great listeners leaving feedback and reviews. If you subscribe and comment on your favorite podcasting app or on YouTube, and give you a shout out, like at the Jenna Daisy on YouTube, at Glockenflecken, by the way. Did I say that? Did I say the name of the channel?
I don't know.
At Glockenflecken. your head's in the clouds today. You're like, oh, just do your outro, dude. Just get it done. I'll come back
you're
in
still
whenever
talking. Okay.
At the Jenna Daisy on YouTube said, I can't believe I was the first one to tell Dr. G about the pig semen eye drops. You're welcome. /I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was something.
Thank you, Jenna. Yes, I can't believe that did not come across. Usually when something happens with weird
your
eyeball
algorithm
stuff,
has failed you.
and right there, either I get emails, messages, and maybe I just haven't been keeping up with any of my messages. But thank you so much for introducing us to the pig semen eye drops. Not the most egregious thing I've heard of people putting in their eyes.
Which is pretty sad.
So full video episodes are up every week on our YouTube channel at Glock'em I also have a Patreon, fun perks, bonus episodes, hang out with other members of the Knock Knock High community. New and revamped Patreon, doing cool stuff.
That's right.
Answering questions as Ortho Bro.
Activities.
That's great. Interactive, all that stuff. Early ad-free episode access. Patreon.com/Glock'em. Speaking of Patreon community perks, let's shout out the Jonathans, shall we? Lucia C., Edward K., Marion W., Mr. Granddaddy, Caitlin C., Brianna L., MP Cole, Tracy B., Mary H., Keith G., Parker, Muhammad L., David H., Kaylee A., Gabe, Gary M., Marlene S., Scott M., Kelsey M., Dr. Hoover, Sean M., Ryan N., Jess K., Hawkeye M.D., Bubby Salt, and Shani D. Patreon roulette time, random shouts on the emergency medicine tier. Shout out to Heather B. for being a patron. And thank you all for listening. We're your hosts, Will and Krista Flannery, also known as the Glock'em Fleckins. Executive producers are Will Flannery, Krista Flannery, Aaron Cordy, Rob Bilden, and Shanti Brick. Editor and engineer Jason Portiz. Our music is by Omer Benzvi. To learn about Knock Knock High's program disclaimer, ethics policy, submission verification, licensure, tip, or release terms, go to glockemfleckins.com or reach out to us knockknockhigh@human-content.com with questions, concerns, or fun medical puns. Knock Knock High is a human content production.
Knock, knock, goodbye.
Thanks for watching the episode. You can find more on that playlist over there. If you prefer to listen, or you just had your eyes dilated, you can binge full episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Or join the party over on Patreon, where you get early access episodes, hang out with us, get lots of exclusive bonus content. Hope you subscribe, leave a comment below. Let us know what you think.